знаем, для чего у нас будет. Через минуту записать, да, как?
I probably can't look at this in silence. And emotions, of course I want to say, shout probably about it. We are people like everyone else. We also want to be happy, to see this world, to live like all normal people too. This phrase about thousands of years of unlived life is very easy to explain. You can talk a lot about a place where the environmental situation is better, where the problems are more serious, in what country, in what region and territory, and you can do nothing of it watching the average life expectancy. Compared to many countries, I would say to dozens of countries, the people of Kazakhstan live less. Just multiply how much our life is shorter than Japanese, German or Swiss life by the number of population. You get not 1,000 but millions of hours, which turns into thousands of years that we could live. We, me, your friends, relatives, brothers, grandparents, children. And we don't leave them out because we don't pay attention to the environment we live in. We do not care of nature, we pollute it. It then takes its revenge on us, takes away our health, and we live less. For a moment, let's pretend that we completely eliminated all the weapons. There would be no threats. Why then? There would be no fear, primarily between countries. Therefore, I believe that a man who loves guns is a little bit an abnormal man, I believe. There is some kind of threat coming from him. The first nuclear explosion was conducted on August 29th, 1949. Then, 116 atmospheric nuclear explosions were conducted at the experimental field site. Some of the explosions were on the surface of the Earth, some were conducted in the air. Then, in 1965, the International Convention banning nuclear testing in the atmosphere was signed. And since then, there have been nuclear explosions. Only underground nuclear explosions. Well, I'm talking about the Semipalatinsk test site. The main sites were the Degelen site, where nuclear explosions were conducted in a tunnel. Then the Balapan and Sarozian sites, where nuclear explosions were conducted in vertical excavations in wells. And the Telkiam site, where excavation nuclear explosions were conducted to study the possibility of using nuclear explosions for peaceful purposes, for digging channels, structures, and others. This spring, we were able to meet an artist who is unique in every way. Get acquainted with him too. Hello, my name is Karipbek KUYUKOV. I was born in 1968. I was born in Yegindabulak village in Karaganda region. My village is a village that is literally 100 kilometers from the former Semipalatinsk test site. Karipbek KUYUKOV was born without hands, which did not prevent him from being creative since childhood. He draws with his mouth and feet. For many years, our hero is a successful artist and an active public figure. He uses his media personality to cover problems related to atomic energy and nuclear weapons testing. Generally, my emotions are lifelong emotions. I think that people who are born with disabilities like me probably have a lifelong struggle, and we have to overcome something all our lives, I guess. Twice as much we probably have to take some effort, and it's natural when I see people like that who have been hurt. I've seen so many families where people have been born with even worse disabilities than I have. I've seen people who were just sitting there for life, in villages, in the countryside. A child was born who was just a vegetable, a log. The parents would put it in a trough all day long. First, she would wash laundry in this trough, then she would put him in it. He looked up at the sky all day with his eyes, or at the ceiling. When I saw these people, I realized that I was one of them, and I had such a fate. So I think I probably couldn't look at it in silence. An emotion. I wish I could probably say, shout about it. We are people like everyone else. We also want to be happy, to see this world, to live like all normal people too. Karipbek and I met, I don't remember where or when it was. It was so long ago. I think he lived near the firing range back then. We used to go there often. And on one of our visits, I think there is a village called Bulak that we met there once in the 90s. I remember nothing. I remember being a terribly interesting person. I'm also keen on painting. My dad got me used to it. I think I have a little bit of a knack for it. Karipbek is also a painter. I was struck by that. Well, and of course, the strength of human spirit is worth mentioning in such strokes of fate to learn to draw with his feet. And not just children's pictures, but pictures that are recognized as ones of an accomplished master, painter, and an artist. Exhibitions around the world. I admire him. When you don't feel well or have economic problems or whatever, you think that's what a hard life is like. I remember Karipbek and think, man, my life is so easy. Here's a man of iron, a rock. He's a model for me of how to withstand the blows of fate. This is my favorite niece. I named her myself, Amina. I named her. We always play daughters and mothers like that. She's my mother and I'm her daughter. She already knows I don't have hands, she says. And she always gives me everything at my feet because she knows I don't have hands. She is used to it by now. You're our mother, aren't you? And who am I? When she strokes my belly, you get a baby in there, she says. Because no one else has a belly like that. Not my grandfather, not my father, but I have a belly like that. I would like to remind the world of the words that Olja Somarovich said. If you want peace, go to peace. What I want, I draw in my pictures. I prefer to paint landscapes. What happened in my life? Some significant for me events. And what I see naturally, I wanted to show and reflect in my works. So when the anti-nuclear movement, Nevada Semipalatinsk, was launched in 1989, we witnessed what was going on at the Semipalatinsk test site. All the more so, I saw with my own eyes the victims, the people who had suffered. Naturally, I wanted to show in my works all these consequences, what it led to. Soviet rule. And that was one of the worst secrets, the bomb. Both the creation and the testing. And in general, all of this, as they say, is tightened with barbed wire. And when they seized that land, in fact, from Kazakhstan, in the distant 46, 47, Beria didn't ask anybody, as they say. There were 3-4 pieces of land all over the Soviet Union. They chose this one here, near Semipalatinsk. They surrounded it with barbed wire and strict secrecy. There was a division or 2 of guards on the army scale. You are driving in the steppe. All of a sudden, there is a barbed wire. And goodbye, go back. There is a barrier at best on the road. There is a soldier with a machine gun. You have to understand the realities of the time, the context, the meaning of when it all began. It was the end of the 1940s. The war was officially over in the Second World War, but in the hands of the state it was still going on. The dispersal was such that everybody is the enemy. You have to stock up on weapons. That is why the population was treated like soldiers at war. Women will give birth to new ones. That's what the military leaders used to say. On the other hand, no one knew anything then about radioactivity, how dangerous it is, starting from what level this danger actually exists. The famous stories about Kurchatov. He shows the government of the Soviet Union, the first working nuclear reactor. It has no casing, just uranium blocks, graphite blocks on top, tubes and instruments. And he sees it, and the commission watches. It's not like anything is moving. It's not a steam boiler. Nothing is buzzing. They say it's working. And you can't see anything. They're all hiding in birch stack of wood. Because birch contains a lot of water and hydrogen. It's protection from the neutron flux from the reactor. Protection. That is a stack of wood. He comes out from behind this stack of wood, goes to the reactor and says, "Look, now invisible neutrons are reflected from my body and get back to the reactor. Reaction is intensifying. Now the power arrow goes to the right. He goes, the power arrow goes to the right. The reactor is bare. It has no shooting. There are several thousand X-rays per hour of radioactive radiation. For sure." He goes out to demonstrate. That is to say, a simultaneous indifference to the fate of the population and health, and simultaneous ignorance of what levels are dangerous. Criminal ignorance. A reasonable person would act like this. If I don't know, I guess I shouldn't expose the population. Well, then the reasoning was different. Well, we don't know if it's dangerous or not, so let it be. Let's talk about the famous nuclear lake and much more. We are in Kurchatov. Hello, my name is Subotin Sergei Borisovich. Before the site was shut down, I worked in nuclear explosions. It works on engineering and geological support of nuclear explosions. And for more than 30 years, I'm engaged in study of consequences of nuclear explosions. That is the main aspect of my scientific interests, is to study migration of radioactive products with underground waters. It is worth recalling here that nuclear explosions were initiated as part of a program that was created at the end of the 50s. The main purpose of this program was to evaluate the possibility of using nuclear explosions in the national economy. For example, to extinguish fires in gas fields, to crush rocks in the development of deposits, to destroy radioactive waste, and to create water reservoirs in arid areas of the country. About that thing you mentioned, the nuclear lake, that was the first object of that program, code-named Chagan. It was implemented at the Semipalatinsk test site at the Balapan site. At the confluence of the Chagan and Achisu rivers, an underground nuclear explosion was conducted on January the 15th, 1965, at a depth of 178 meters, with a yield of 140 kilotons. As a result of this explosion, a crater up to 500 meters in diameter and up to 100 meters deep was formed. Around the crater, a pile of up to 30 meters high, I think, was formed. Then a canal was dug into the crater from the confluence of the Chagan and Achisu rivers. And in the spring of 1965, the crater was filled with meltwater. Later, a hydraulic dam was built near the crater to regulate the water level in the reservoir. After that, two reservoirs were created. These are internal one, which in the crater of the explosion has a volume of up to 7 million cubic meters of water, and an external reservoir behind the crater with a volume of more than 10 million cubic meters of water. The distribution of radioactive products produced by the explosion was approximately as follows. Part of the products, up to 20%, escaped into the atmosphere, and up to 40% were distributed in the pile area. The part of products that was released into the atmosphere formed a radioactive trace that spread to the northeast and east. Here, the 7 villages most affected by this explosion were exposed to radiation, with dose rates of up to 40 millisieverts per hour. The radioactive contamination spread downwind in the form of so-called traces, and you can see them on the maps. The explosion here, not everything is dirty, but where the wind blew, that's where the tail went 200 kilometers away. The soil in this trace is contaminated, like radioactive waste. This land is to be forever inaccessible for the population, for the cattle. There are no fences even now. How a cow can understand that it's clean here and dirty there? If the Akims of the districts have no maps, people don't know where the test site is. We conducted opinion polls and asked them to say in which direction the test site is located from the village. The answers were absolutely a finger in the sky. 100 kilometers, the test site is there. 10 kilometers away, here, they don't know where the test site is actually. The borders of the test site in Soviet times were drawn terribly conventionally. Precisely, the largest populated place is Sarzhal village. If you look at the map, the official border of the test site goes like this, and then makes a semicircle, bypassing Sarzhal village. Does the radioactive contamination know this administrative border? Turns it around, Modern studies conducted at the nuclear lake have shown that the main radioactive contamination is confined to the crater. It is shown here in dark color in this figure. The radius of spread of contamination varies from 1 to 5 kilometers. The total area of contamination reaches 20 square kilometers. The radioactive contamination is mainly represented by radionuclides like cesium, strontium, europium isotopes, and transuranic elements. In about 100 years, the transuranic elements will have the main impact, because these elements that I have listed will decay. In this case, this part of the crater where the transuranic element is spread will not be suitable for economic use, even in the distant future, because their decay, for example of plutonium, 239, 240 is 24,000 years.
But what about radiation? Is it felt anyhow?
To be honest, I've heard a lot of tall stories. To be honest, to me it's a little bit of ignorance. I met people who said, I can feel radiation with my tongue. I said, how can you sense with your tongue? Some by smell, they say. I say, you can sense with your tongue if there is an admixture of metals, chemical elements in the air. I used to work in cyanide production. I picked up cyanide with my tongue because you can taste it, that is true. But the radiation itself is not. You can't detect it without a device. Yes, in passing, if there isn't any chemicals, you can associate, but it will not be that. It is different. In fact, although the territory of the test site is huge, over 18,000 square kilometers, not all of it is dirty.
I mean, they want to give a part to agriculture, don't they?
I don't know whether they want to or they don't want to, whether they plan to or they don't plan to. As it will be, so it will be. It's hard to say. Of course, ideally it would be yes. That is, that territory which is clean, which has no radioactive contamination, as such could be used. These are pieces of the land. All the people who live in contaminated areas or cattle that graze in contaminated areas must be relocated to clean areas immediately, tomorrow. Contaminated lands, a fence, a trench, engineering protection, barbed wire. No entry signs, and that's it. The problem is solved. Thus, the dirty area will be separated from the clean areas. When the safety of the population will be ensured, recalling your question, was it a criminal intent of the Soviet state? There was criminal ignorance, and now criminal knowledge. They know where it is dirty, where it is clean. They know that the security of the population, agriculture, is not ensured enough. Take it away, use it, because most of it is clean.
This is yesterday's kumys. Today's has not yet arrived. Fresh kumys will taste even better. They told us, don't look at it, don't look at it. But we wiped our tears and looked anyway. Because, we didn't know any better.
You said that you had 9 children, and which one was Murat?
He was the 5th.
The 5th. How many sons and daughters do you have?
Now only 4 sons and 1 daughter. 2 children. 2 children have died.
Tell us about your life. What do you do? What news do you watch? Soccer. Do you like soccer? What team do you like? Italy. What other team do you like? Only Italy. You know a lot about soccer, don't you? There are a lot of children sick there too. There are adults who have no legs, no eyes, no hands. It's a consequence of the test site. When we were kids, there were tests, but we didn't know about it. In '81, I went to school, and during the tests, they took us out of school into the street. They said it was a drill, and they took us all out. We stood and watched the school shake. The ground was shaking under our feet. As children, we didn't understand what it was. It was only later, after the closing ceremony, that we understood that it was a test site and where atomic bombs were tested. Under the Soviet regime, it was impossible to talk about it.
We had 6 daughters, but God unexpectedly took one of them away. Now we have 5 daughters, thank God. The youngest daughter has a congenital disease. She's a test site victim. I'm one of those mothers who never give up, despite the difficulties. One of the girls was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 3. We received chemotherapy in Germany. For 7 years long, it tormented us. But now, thank God, she's on the mend. My younger daughter, she's missing 4 fingers on her left hand and 2 bones on her legs because of the consequences of the test site. The 4th generation is suffering from the tests. And it's true. There are lots of congenital diseases now. My heart hurts when I see these suffering mothers. But I don't see them getting help. I only see mothers and doctors fussing and fighting for the babies' lives. I want to wish all the mothers who didn't break down and who are struggling to this day a lot of strength and energy, so that my people will do well, to live and to be happy with their children. I think the test site will still take lives. What they say closed, it is just a word, and no one is interested in the consequences. Mother and child suffer. People suffer.
In the next issues, we will visit the House of Infants in Semipalatinsk, the unique medical anatomy museum, and tell you about the difficult fate of a person who knows the consequences of nuclear tests firsthand. Share your opinion in the comments. Your activity is very important to us. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you for not being indifferent.
Самый сильный стресс я перенес, наверное, когда я посетил в Семипалатинске, есть мединститут, и когда я увидел лабораторию медицинскую, где были заспиртованы вот эти вот дети, ну, пострадавшие дети. Вот. И когда я ходил, я смотрел на эти колбы, я подумал, что ведь могло бы случиться так, что я могу быть один из них, что я мог бы тоже сидеть, быть заспиртованным в этой колбе.
Доброго времени суток. Меня зовут Эльдар. Мы с моей небольшой командой профессионалов проживаем в Казахстане и снимаем фильм о бывшем Семипалатинском ядерном полигоне. Прошу внимания.
Начнем с того, что в этом году, а точнее 29 августа, пройдет ровно 30 лет с момента закрытия Семипалатинского испытательного ядерного полигона. Это, несомненно, огромная победа казахстанцев. Впоследствии наша Родина стала первой в мире страной, добровольно отказавшейся от ядерного оружия. Период проведения ядерных испытаний на территории нашей страны – это чудовищный этап в новейшей истории всей планеты. Боль, слезы, сломанные человеческие судьбы. Но с полной остановкой ядерных испытаний исчезли далеко не все проблемы, связанные с бывшим полигоном. Мы стремимся осветить их и, возможно, дать толчок переменам в лучшую сторону.
Нашей команде предстоит поистине огромная работа по сбору информации со всех уголков Казахстана. И только благодаря вашей поддержке и отзывчивости нам удастся реализовать этот проект. Будем на связи, дамы и господа.